Hello, everybody. Hello to be here today. I'm very happy to open this conference for Olympic Games and Global Cities. I would like to start for a few minutes to present the program, and after I will let Belinda Wheaton starting the conference at 9. We are today in this conference with many different timing in the world. So we will start with Belinda Wheaton from New Zealand, and we will finish the day with people from Europe and from California. So it will be many people who come and who go back during the day, and we will register and record the different presentation to put the video on our website, Olympic Games and Global Cities. So if you miss some of the presentation of the intervention, you will have the possibility to watch it in the website of Olympic Games and Global Cities. So I am Alexandre Faure, postdoctorant at the Fondation France-Japon de l'École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. And I am the actual coordinator of the program of research Olympic Games and Global Cities that aim to compare the different Olympic urban projects of global cities since 2000, and more particularly the case of Paris and Tokyo, evidently. So after the Games of Tokyo and all the difficulties Tokyo have to organize and to postpone the game for the first time of the history of the Olympism, we decided to have this conference in order to discuss in the first time. So today is the 30th of November, the question of the games in a general way, and more particularly the question of the Tokyo Games. And we will have next week, the 7th and the 8th December, another discussion about the preparation of the Games of Paris 2024 and Los Angeles 2028. So this conference is a 3-day conference with many researchers coming to explain and to present and share the results of their research. And we will have, during the 3 days of the conference, 3 roundtables with local stakeholders and with some people from the city of Tokyo, city of Paris, and the neighborhood suburb of Paris to discuss how they manage to organize the games. So today, you can see at the screen the program of today. Yes, so today we will have 2 sessions and 1 roundtable. So the first session will be about the Tokyo Games and about the image of the cities that the games provided. And we will start with Belinda Wheaton at 9 from Professor Belinda Wheaton from the University of Waikato, and she will talk about the Agenda 2020 of the International Olympic Committee. We will then have 2 presentations from our colleague from Japan, so Professor Takayuki Arima from the University of Yokohama, and Soichiro Minami, Dr. Soichiro Minami from the Ministry of Land and Infrastructure and Transport in Japan. They will talk about the question of games and tourism in Tokyo, and I hope and I think they will talk about the consequences of the pandemic and the postponement. We will also have presentation from the Professor Masamichi Aihara from the Osaka University of Economics, and it will talk about another event that will happen in Japan in 2025 with the Osaka-Kansai Japan Expo, and he will talk a little bit about the bid of Osaka in 2008 for the Olympic Games. So you see, we will have in the case of Japan, it will evidently at the center of this day, and we will talk in general terms of the games, but also of the consequence of the games on cities. We will at 11 have a roundtable with Tokyo Games stakeholder, and so 11 in Central European time, but 7 afternoon for Japanese colleagues. And we will talk during this conference about the legacy of Tokyo and the postponement of Tokyo. For this conference, for this roundtable, we will have 4 intervenants. So Fumiaki Nakayasu from the TOCOG for Tokyo Olympic Committee of Organization of the Games. We will have Professor Usubisako, President of the Tokyo Seika University. We will also have Mitsuru Yamashiro, member of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, and he is now in Paris for 1 year. And we should have at the first time Niccolo Cupini, but he is not able to come because of an accident, so he will be replaced by his colleague Filippo Bignami from the SUSP University. After that, we will have a lunch break for the Central European Time presentators and visitors, and we will have a second session this afternoon about mega events and long-term strategy, sustainability and celebration in the city, with 3 different interventions. One from Tomoko Tamari from the University of London. She will talk about the question of the architecture and the global brands during the Tokyo Olympics. We will have a second presentation from Jessamine Abel, a new Tokyo again, local impacts of Olympic diplomacy. She will talk about Tokyo Games, but from an historical and diplomatical point of view. And we will finish with Dr. Erez Golani Solomon and Dr. Christian Dimmer. They will talk to us about the bubble protocol that was put in place during the Games of Tokyo to have no incident with the COVID. So there's 3 last intervention will take place this afternoon, and we will finish the day at 4:45 or 5 afternoon if we have many question and answer. So please, if you have some question during the presentation, do not hesitate to put it in the chat, and we will give the question to the presentators at the end of their presentation. And I hope we'll see a good discussion today. Thank you to be here, and we will start at exactly 9 with Belinda Wheaton for the first presentation. Thank you. So, dear Belinda, I think we can start. You have your mic in mute. So thank you to be the first presentation today, and I hope it's not too late from New Zealand. I remember that you are starting from New Zealand, so it is 9 in the morning in Paris and 9 in the evening in New Zealand. We have exactly 12 hours of difference. So thank you for your presentation, and please, I get you the floor, and we will have a question and answer just after your presentation. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we see your presentation and we heard you very good. So perfect. Have a good presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to be speaking around Agenda 2020 and around the issues of sustainability and the environment of the Games in relation to new action sports. So while the Summer Olympics are considered the most watched sporting spectacle in the world, the number of younger viewers has been diminishing for decades. The median age of the US TV audience for the Beijing Olympics in 2008 was age 47, and this had risen to 53 by the time the Rio Games came along. Another study has showed that between London and Rio, there was a 30% drop in the TV viewers between the ages of 18 and 34. Acknowledging the challenges of appealing to contemporary youth, many of whom practice and consume sport differently to previous generations, the IOC has made various efforts to attract younger audiences. These have included the Youth Olympic Games, or the YOG, the first of which was in Singapore in 2010, and then the Olympic Internet TV channel launched in 2016. However, introducing youth-focused action sports such as snowboarding, windsurfing, mountain biking, BMX racing into the Olympic program has been a key strategy. Since its controversial inclusion into the 1998 Olympics, snowboarding has become the darling of the Winter Games. With X Games inspired representational styles and the star power of youth cultural icons such as Shaun White, the snowboarder, who was credited for 48% increase in the 18 to 24-year-old viewers at the 2010 Games. The success of snowboarding in bringing younger viewers back to the Winter Olympics is now driving the inclusion of more action sports into the Summer Games. And this has been the focus of my research, which I will speak to in a moment. Alongside this, since 2010, the YOG has continued to become an important testing ground for trialing new sports such as kiteboarding, breaking, parkour, skateboarding, basketball 3x3. They've also adopted more social media innovations and new concepts such as the Sports Lab in Nanjing and the Urban Park in Buenos Aires. Not all these experiments have resulted in future Olympic inclusion, but many have. The arrival of President Bach in 2013 and his Agenda 2020 policy suggested a more urgent emphasis on addressing the wide-ranging and growing critiques of the Olympics, including its relevance for youth globally, gender equity, and sustainability. 4 youth-focused action sports, surfing, skateboarding, sport climbing, and BMX freestyle, featured for the first time on the program in the Tokyo Games. The IOC have described their inclusion as the most comprehensive evolution of the Olympic program in modern history. However, as commentators have shown, there are contradictions in the policy, rhetoric, and practice of Agenda 2020, which we can also see through the processes of including action sports into the Olympic Games. So in this paper today, I will highlight this contested and political process underpinning the inclusion of these sports, illustrating some of the ongoing challenges for the IOC to stay relevant in a changing sporting landscape, and for addressing this challenge of youth relevance and also sustainability. So just to kind of outline my talk, I'm going to talk first of all about the research that this is drawing on, speak a bit more about Agenda 2020, just highlight that this was a pretty complex process. And then I'm going to focus on 2 examples, the Tokyo Urban Park, and particularly I want to speak about the surfing events and the myth of sustainability, both in Tokyo and Paris. And I'll be speaking particularly about the wave pool and the debates around that. And I'll argue in some ways Olympic surfing has been a bit of a smokescreen for broader issues. And so then to draw some conclusions, I'll think about what this tells us about action sports and the Olympics and Agenda 2020, and how it shows really that Agenda 2020 is just a performance of change largely. So the research. So this is based on a research I've been conducting with my colleague, Holly Thorpe, who's also a professor at the University of Waikato. And we've been doing this for quite some time. We started out back in Vancouver, so over 10 years ago. And broadly, this research then takes both a longitudinal and a multi-methods approach. And the key phases that I'm going to speak to today is from 2015, which was when these sports were included, up to Tokyo. And that's the book that's just come out that speaks about this research. So I'm just really giving you a small snapshot today. So in terms of the methods we used, as you can see, there's a bunch of them. We had an online survey. It was available in 9 languages, and that was to target the views of action sport participants. We did media analysis at the point of shortlisting and after shortlisting to understand how the media, what they thought about the inclusion of action sports. And then I guess the most relevant part is the in-depth interviews that we conducted with individuals who are actually involved in action sports being included. So people within these sporting industries, the sports federations, but we also spoke to people within the IOC. We went to the Olympic archives and we held a stakeholder symposium, a couple of them actually here in New Zealand, and attended events such as the YOG and Olympism in Action. we also did some focus groups with action sport participants. And finally, the last phase was really looking at the impact in different national contexts. Excuse me. Okay, so President Bach's inauguration in 2013 was followed by the launch of Agenda 2020 in 2014. And it's been described as his strategic roadmap for the future of the Olympic movement. And there's three key pillars: credibility, sustainability, and youth. And as I said, these were driven by growing critiques of the IOC in very different ways, but including a recognition that the world was changing and the Olympic movement needed to be an agenda of change. So it was certainly, we can see Agenda 2020 as one of the IOC's efforts to become, or certainly appear to become, more relevant in this quite quickly changing sport media landscape. And it's, I think, gender equity was also an important part of it, with this aim to achieve 50% female participation and greater diversity. And President Bach, as you can see the quote there on the slide, said, "We want to take sport to the youth. With the many options that young people have, we cannot expect anymore that they will come to us automatically. We have to go to them." And as I showed, as I said earlier, we can see that in the viewing figures for the audience, TV audiences. So one of the things that Agenda 2020 did was establish new rules for more flexibility in the Olympic program, which had been pretty fixed for a long time. And this gave host cities, for the first time, the ability to choose new additions to the program. So the Tokyo 2020 committee were tasked with this for the first time, and they listed these criteria that they were looking to. So sports that would add value, had youth appeal, were attractive for TV, media, and the public, gender equality, but at the same time, minimum impact on the number of events and or quotas or infrastructure, and not too much in the sense of operational costs and complexity. So that was quite a challenge for them, I would imagine. And then in 2015, 5 sports were shortlisted: karate, baseball, and softball, which are popular with Japanese audiences, and then the 3 action sports of surfing, skateboarding, and sport climbing. So I'm just talking to these, the 3 action sports, and they really were seen to represent youthful, cool lifestyles, conspicuous consumption, along with cultural and digital innovation, and a growing influence in the broader youth cultural landscape. So for the IOC, these action sports provide important new economic and cultural sources of growth and influence. And just, I guess, a quote here from some of the action sport industry people we spoke to at this time when they were shortlisted. Their view was that skateboarding was going to make the Olympics so much cooler and hipper. And you can see here, again, it's very youth relevant, it's accessible, it's global, it's complementary, it does have the competition as well as the art form, but it's driven by what youth are doing with technology and music. So there's a perfect storm. When we did the survey I spoke about, you can just see here on this slide that when we asked our participants, which sport would you like to see in the Olympics, skateboarding was definitely the most popular. You've got street skateboarding there, vert, ramp, and bowl, and other action sports, apart from BMX freestyle, that was also very popular, are further behind. So this proposal was then ratified by the IOC at their executive board in Rio. And the decision was to include all of these sports and to use temporary venues installed in urban settings, marking a historic step in bringing the games to young people as spectators, as well as TV audiences, and reflecting the growing trend of urbanism in sport, which was increasingly becoming part of the IOC's language. Thomas Bach claimed he was delighted that these games in Tokyo would be more youthful, more urban, and there would be more women. Alongside this, there was a new review instigated by Bach as part of Agenda 2020 to measure the overall performance of all Olympic sports. And other international federations began to realize the importance of changing their sporting disciplines and events to be more youth-friendly. And as a result, the International Cycling Union approved BMX freestyle, and the International Basketball Federation added the 3x3 game both to their offerings in Tokyo, but they had to both remove existing events to do that. Now, in our book, we talk an awful lot about this process of inclusion and the complexities, and I don't have time to speak to that, but I do want just to highlight that there are really many challenges. Not least, these sports have countercultural heritages. Many members in the communities view them as alternative lifestyles rather than as sports. And they celebrate value systems such as self-expression, creativity, and fun that in many ways are incompatible with the disciplinary, hierarchical, and nationalistic Olympic regime. And we saw that with snowboarding when it first came into the games. You know, there was a lot of contestation. And as you might expect, the same happened in these sports. Some organized petitions, other voiced concerns in the social media, which our research tracked. They didn't want a lot of the core participants, these sports, to be in the Olympics. But many in the actual industries, so the company owners and the event organizers, were very supportive of Olympic inclusion, as they saw it as a way of growing economically. And it was a time when action sports industries were plateauing, and many played a key role in supporting the IOC in Olympic inclusion. And it's also important to bear in mind that the international federations, given the job of bringing these sports into the Olympics, had not done this before. And in the case of skateboarding, there wasn't an international federation. One had to be created. So there was a lot of issues that had to be worked out, from what the competitions would look like, equipment, uniforms, drug testing, venues. You know, it was a real minefield. So there was a lot of work, and also to get buy-in from the athletes, for many of whom the Olympics was not the pinnacle of their sporting careers. So, having given some context, just I guess the first point I would like to make is that these sports were very male dominated at the elite level. And there have been some really important gender implications of these new sports being included into the games, which was one of the objectives of Agenda 2020. So at the time of Olympic inclusion, many action sports and industries were dominated by men, and women struggled to gain recognition at the elite level, particularly in skateboarding. And our research showed that the IOC's requirement for equal numbers of male and female athletes in Tokyo had released some significant impacts for women in these sports, creating opportunities for women as athletes and also as leaders. For the IOC, these new sports have helped achieve their Agenda 2020 objective of the 50-50 gender ratio. And I think in Tokyo, for those of you who watched the skateboarding, you'll see that these sports really gained a lot of exposure, and in particular, for me at least, the skateboarding, the number of very young girls, tweens and teen girls, such as 13-year-old Sky Brown from Great Britain, Rezo Leal from Brazil, and a whole bunch of Japanese and Chinese girl skateboarders who won many of the medals. So I want to talk a bit about Tokyo's urban park. The urban park concept was first trialed in the 2018 Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires. And this inspired the Urban Festival and the playground concepts to feature at the Tokyo waterfront city area design. According to Olympic media, many of the experiential elements tested in the urban park were planned for Tokyo, such as opening the venues to fans when the Olympic competition finished, and the opportunity to try out new sports. So this was really an attempt by the IOC and the Tokyo Olympic Committee to change the spectator experience. These spaces have been carefully choreographed to bring sport to the people in a festival environment, with skateboarding, sport climbing, and BMX freestyle in the same area, along with live music and art, creating an urban, youth-friendly vibe. And the plan was that people in Tokyo could have free access with a kind of bracelet like they would get at a music festival if they had previously registered, or even if they just turned up with a skateboard. So I think we can see here these concepts are very much underpinned by critiques that the Olympic Games are elitist and beyond the reach of everyday people. So this was an attempt to make it seem more accessible, interactive, and participatory. Of course, due to the pandemic and without spectators, what we saw in Tokyo, I think, was a very different version of this. And maybe there will be others that will speak to that during the different presentations. Surfing, I think, in many ways is a very strange addition to the Olympic program. It's had a very paradoxical journey from being an alternative lifestyle to becoming an Olympic sport. It isn't urban, and it isn't actually even youthful if you look at the demographics of participants. Competitive surfing is also an increasingly elitist sport with limited geographic and demographic reach. But the ISA, the International Surfing Association, has been lobbying for a long time, over many years now. And they created, I guess, a good package that really sold this lifestyle idea. Surfing is also popular in Japan, and the IOC embraced this dominant idea of surfing, the dominant discourse, which symbolizes youthful, cool, and adrenaline-fueled lifestyles. However, the format of Olympic surfing became a big debate. The possibility of Olympic surfing taking place in an artificial wave pool rather than the ocean was a really hotly contested issue. Many surfers initially describe wave pools as the ultimate sellouts that would take surfing away from its natural and ever-changing ocean environment, killing the sport's creativity and meaning as a nature-based activity. On the other hand, it was recognized that wave pools could potentially provide an excellent sporting environment that was controllable, predictable. It would ensure that competitions could be held regardless of the weather, the location, and would be really spectacular on TV for non-surfing audiences. Back in 2015, when these debates were taking place, people were also critical of the quality of waves a wave pool could produce. But then in 2015, multiple world champion Kelly Slater's surf pool, the Wave Ranch, was revealed, which used a new technology that was described as game-changing, and one journalist claimed produced the most perfect and expensive waves in the world. Soon after this, the WSL, the World Surf League that organizes the professional surfing competitions, held competitions at the Surf Ranch, both in 2018 and 19, to strategically demonstrate that surfing in wave pools could be really top competition and was viable for the future Olympics. Because of this, many were predicting that this wave pool would fit the Olympic requirements. But alongside this, there was confirmation that surfing would be held at Shida Beach, 40 miles east of Tokyo on the Pacific coastline. And this was a venue that was widely considered as a very mediocre surfing location, with waves likely to be small and weak, providing poor competition. And so the momentum was really building for the wave pool. It's also important to understand the politics and the vested interests underpinning this. The WSL had subsequently become a major shareholder in Kelly Slater's wave company, as well as leading to speculation of insider dealings. Many were predicting that Olympic surfing would be in the pool regardless of the rhetoric. The WSL were clearly pushing really hard for this to happen. And this was the press release from the CEO. And she argued if you can imagine the best surfers in the world competing in this world-class wave facility, floodlit at night, stadium seating, amazing camera angles. And she said this could be a reality, and we're trying to get one built in Tokyo in time. And her belief was, if it happened, we'll be able to do that. It's likely to be the lasting impression of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. However, ultimately, this didn't happen. And the decision by the Tokyo Olympic Committee to hold the event at the beach was tied to its need to create a legacy that it had envisaged, and so had the IOC. And this was based on a surfing festival to foster surfing's lifestyle image. They wanted fans on the beach, and they wanted people out there wearing shorts and bikinis, according to the IOC president. And this was the image they had sold to both Tokyo and the IOC. And for Tokyo, surfing was important in creating a legacy centered on reconnecting Japanese people with the coast and life by the sea. And this was really important following the Fukushima disasters after the tsunami and the nuclear plant disaster back in 2011. And Japanese people, it was claimed, were fearful of going to the ocean and fearful of the beach. So this was an opportunity to create a legacy, to upgrade beaches and hospitality and get people out there. And this was confirmed by our interviews with key members of the Tokyo Olympic Committee in 2018, who said, yes, that the wave pool had big potential, but really emphasized surfing as a nature-based ocean sport, and how this notion of it being more than a sport, being a culture, was really important to them. Other commentators were arguing that there was a real politics underpinning this, and that really this was more widely part of Japan's response to the tsunami and Fukushima disaster. As Jules Boykoff and Gaffney have argued, these tragedies provided an archetypal opportunity for what Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism. That is, using the Olympic spectacle and ideology to create a collective feel-good. Similarly, Japanese scholar Ishii argues that Japan was strategically using the Olympics as part of this national recovery project, or what he calls a creative reconstruction. And through this, they were emphasizing the cultural association with surfers, nature, the beach, and clean water as an essential part of this wider creative reconstruction project. And in the interviews we conducted with insiders, they actually went as far as to argue that surfing was a smokescreen to rebuild Japanese confidence in their coastlines being clean and safe. It was claimed that following the nuclear disaster, radioactive waste had leaked into the oceans. And you can see in these two quotes here on the slide. So the biggest thing for them was that it seemed politically that Japan had surfing in the Olympics, and they wanted proof that their oceans are clean after Fukushima. And this had a massive, massive bearing on it. So the environmental message, as embodied in the surfing festival, was central for Tokyo's recovery and for the IOC, even it seemed if it was at the expense of creating a quality surfing competition. So I'm going to leave Tokyo for a moment and move to Paris, because there are still some really interesting developments in terms of the wave pool. So by 2018, it seemed unlikely there would be a pool in Tokyo. And so attention turned to the Paris 2024 Games, where it was confirmed that surfing would get a second outing. And many commentators considered the wave pool was an inevitability. In early 2019, the Wave Garden Technology placed an official bid to host surfing in a new wave pool in a Parisian suburb. You can see there, and there were reports that the Kelly Slater Wave Company wanted to rival their bid and were also building a wave pool. But then, in a surprising turn of events, in June 2019, the Paris 2024 president announced, we won't be using an artificial wave for the surfing event. We're very lucky to have several natural sites that can be used in France. The report suggested that the cost of the infrastructure for the artificial wave pool was too high, and instead the Southwest Atlantic surf beaches around Biarritz, Lacanau, La Torche, which are long-standing venues on the professional surfing tour, were being considered. Then, in December 2019, seemingly out of the blue, the 2024 committee announced they had chosen Tahiti in French Polynesia, a geopolitical administrative division of France, as the site for the Olympic surfing event. They reasoned that the renowned surf break Taipu in Tahiti is one of the most spectacular and powerful in the world. It's a popular big wave venue on the men's professional tour. So it would be a more suitable, spectacular and media-friendly wave site than the Atlantic coast of France, despite being nearly 10,000 miles from the host city. The IOC Executive Board ratified this decision in March 2020. There were concerns expressed about the cost, the lack of legacy for France, and the environmental impact, particularly as it was reported that athletes would fly back to Paris for the ceremonies. This set of events vividly shows that in terms of sustainability, the Agenda 2020 rhetoric is largely greenwashing, corporate greenwashing. The IOC recently asserted in 2020, it is now a carbon neutral organization and is committed to becoming a climate positive organization by 2024. Yet it continues to be highly selective in which aspects of its operation it uses to evidence such claims. It's striking in the debates about wave pools, little if any consideration was given to their environmental impact, and these pools have huge energy consumption. These contradictory practices do not suggest the IOC or any of the other stakeholders in this process are seriously interested in providing, as they claim, a clear trajectory for the global sporting community to help combat climate change, or to ensure that all upcoming Olympic Games are carbon neutral and have a significantly reduced carbon footprint. As well as contradicting these environmental claims, the decision to hold the event in the remote islands of Tahiti will reiterate the elitism of competitive surfing and goes against previous claims of using these events to help bring sport to the people. So in my final, just running over time a little bit here, section, I just want to highlight some further contradictions in the policy, rhetoric and practices that I think are rife in Agenda 2020 that we see through these sports. As Olympic scholars Sugden and Tomlinson argue in outlining a critical sociocultural research to interrogate the meaning of the Olympics, our task is to look behind the spectacle and magical moments for the chains of power, prestige and status that fuel and mobilize the contemporary Olympic machine. And they argue we need to identify the stakes for which bidding and hosting cities and the nations of which they are part defy economic and social logic, and analyze and interpret the broken promises as well as the utopian projections of Olympism. As our research has shown, the relationship between consumers and sports mega events are never stable, but in a constant state of rearticulation amongst the various contextual forces at play. As Boykoff has proposed, the concept of celebratory capitalism facilitates an understanding of how the Olympic system is rearticulating itself in the contemporary neoliberal context, showing the economic system's nimbleness in adapting to this era. Agenda 2020 has been this key mechanism or framework to demonstrate change within the Olympic industry under the leadership of Bach. In December 2020, the IOC made an assessment of its success to date, stating, and on the slide there, Olympic Agenda 2020 has changed the Olympic Games, the IOC and the Olympic movement. Having achieved 85% of the recommendations is a great example of what we can accomplish. The inclusion of action sports was heralded as important for fulfilling these objectives, particularly in achieving youth relevance, greater connection with young people and those outside the Olympic movement, and gender equity. We've seen that it is really an attempt to claw back younger viewers and to build global audiences who are vital for the continuation of the Olympic system. And this strategy is evident in the inclusion of breakdancing in the Paris Games and the interest that the IOC are taking in parkour and perhaps most controversially esports, further pushing boundaries of what sport is in the 21st century, despite the challenge this presents for their traditional core audiences and stakeholders. Regarding gender equity, our analysis shows that the Olympic inclusion has had some benefits for female athletes and those in leadership, but less so in terms of diversity and internationalism. These again appear quite performative. And despite the rhetoric from the international federations, that this would really help internationalize the Olympics and show greater diversity, this didn't eventuate in Tokyo. More so in skateboarding than the other sports, but surfing had such a small field of competitors, it was really dominated by a few nations. I think the urban park concept and beach festival are important attempts by the IOC to change the spectator experiences and to make these activities more accessible. But as we've seen from the Paris example, this may not continue. And I've argued in terms of sustainability, the Agenda 2020 rhetoric in this example is largely corporate greenwashing. So I think I'll just jump through that, which is just to say that really the impact in terms of TV audiences is hard to assess at this point. Certainly across the games, the TV audience was lower, but these sports were credited as having good audience figures. In terms of the impact in Japan, certainly based on media reports, there has been, I guess, a change in attitude towards skateboarding after the games and the success of their athletes. And it was previously really seen as, I guess, illegitimate. There's a sign there of no skateboarding right by the Olympic venue. And skateboarders are hoping that this might change people's perceptions. So in conclusion, the complex and dynamic relationships between action sports and Olympic Games, I think is very revealing for analysing and interpreting the broken promises as well as these utopian projections of Olympism. While many within the action sport cultural industries eventually got behind the Olympics because it had provided opportunity for growth in challenging times, they have repeatedly shown themselves to be nimble and flexible in seeking out the next opportunities. Such responsiveness to change and creativity in navigating the challenges is a radical distinction to the Olympic Games, which, despite the promise of Agenda 2020, remains a slow-moving machine entrenched in top-down hierarchies and structures. Regardless of the impact on the Tokyo Games, these action sports are to be continued in Paris 2024 with the addition of kiteboarding and break, and also in surfing and in LA 2028. President Bach has given a clear message to host cities and international federations to do everything they can to attract younger audiences, as well as to respond to broader trends in urbanization. The IOC are well aware that the survival of the Olympic Games depends on sponsorship dollars, and they need to fight harder to capture and stay relevant to the next generations of Olympic fans. Whether action sport athletes, their cultures and global audiences go along for the ride, I think is yet to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda, for this quite interesting presentation. I will now take the question of the audience. If you have any question, you can put in the chat, or you can hands up to have the mic. Perhaps I will start with a first question from my side. Do you think that the diminishing interest for the games, for the Olympic Games, is correlated to the diminution of the practice of sports in club? Because I see many researchers in sports studies say that in a lot of countries there is less and less people who do sport in club, and I would like to know if you can link this diminution of sports practice and the diminishing interest for the games for young generation in particular.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think there's lots of measures that we can look at to see that sport no longer has the part it used to play in community life, and team sports particularly have been shown to be less popular around many countries around the world. So that's part of it. I think, though, that that's only one part of it. I think that's happening alongside the emergence of these more individualized sports, whether they're action sports or just more informal sports that fit better into people's lifestyles in the 21st century, you know, whether it's going to the gym or going to Pilates or jogging. All of these things fit better with 21st century living, urban living and rural or suburban living. And alongside that, you know, young people have so many different options now. They play computer games. There are so many different types of activities to engage young people, and they're much less, I think, committed often just to doing one thing. And traditional sports were quite time consuming and constraining in terms of people's lifestyles. And I think there's lots of evidence to show, yeah, that that's a trend that's quite global.
Yes, thank you for this answer. Perhaps can you remember how the IOC selected the sports that are in the game? So I know that some sports are sometimes entering the games and others are outside of the game. So can you remember perhaps the procedure to have a new sport in the games?
Yeah, so the IOC until Agenda 2020 would not let any new sports come into the games unless the International Federation itself chose to change a sport. So, for example, when windsurfing came into the Olympics, it came in under an existing federation, which was yachting, and yachting had to then take out one of its existing other sailing classes, and the same happened with kiteboarding that was going to be in and then it was out. So there have been no changes to program, the same for the BMX. So this is a really radical shift in a way to allow these new sports. That said, the economic model for them seems it's quite unclear, and they don't seem to have shared the economic benefits that the other, you know, main sports have. So I think what we're going to, you know, the Olympic Games, there's already too much happening. You know, there's too many participants. It's too difficult to manage. So the IOC don't want it to grow in that sense, but they will become, I think, increasingly selective about which sports stay. And I think we're seeing that in some of the older, more elitist sports like equestrianism and modern pentathlon and so on are already having to change their offerings.
Yes, thank you. So I remember, so if some people want to have a question, do not hesitate. I will continue because I have many questions. It's very interesting. You speak about the footprint, carbon footprint of the surf in Paris. It's true that Tahiti is 13,000 kilometers from Paris. It's closer from your side than our side.
Yeah.
So perhaps can we do you know if the IOC want to have evaluation of the carbon footprint of every sport? So it's current now in a lot of public policy to have evaluation of the carbon footprint of every activities. Do we know what are the sports the most pollutant sport, we can say that, and if some of the sports are evaluated like that during the games? I don't know if the IOC do that or not.
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I guess my access to that kind of information is only through the policy documents that they provide. And at this point, the policy documents are telling us that they're doing a fantastic job rather than breaking it down. But maybe that will happen in the next years. I'm not sure, because it will be interesting reading. And look, it's not just surfing. I mean, there are so many sports where the amount of equipment and people that are being shipped is huge. But I think for me, what strikes me as the most crazy part is this idea that the competitors would go to an opening ceremony in Paris and then fly to Tahiti and then fly back again. And I that astonishes me, how you can actually imagine that's going to happen or say that's going to happen, while claiming you have concerns for the carbon footprint of your activity.
Yes, thank you for this answer. We have now a question from Florian Burkharthofer. You can have the mic.
Yes, hello, I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for this great presentation. And I really liked how you showed that there is this misfit between the idea that it needs new urban sports and new youth sports, but on the other hand, there is not a real willingness to go like more in direction to the people. So there is this very, or at least for me, I see that there's a problem with urban sports and youth sports that is competitive, but in a different way, not in an elite way. And then there is this this idea how you frame this in a medal winning competition.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear more about this this kind of the side of the action sport people. So are they really seeing like this as a new opportunity? Especially interested in climbing, for example, or is it more like, is there one part who says, okay, we can cash in on this, but on the other hand, it's like might destroy our fan base on the low level?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. So we collected data in lots of different ways because we wanted to get at the voices of the core participants, the marginal participants, and the people, involved. And I would say probably, although there was definitely lots of contestation across all these sports, maybe sport climbing was less, although they were very concerned about the environmental impact. And they were also concerned, like all these sports, that if more people found out about the sports, then, the mountains and the crags were going to get even busier. But we also found there were some real generational differences, and the under 18s were much more enthusiastic about these sports being competitive sports. Whether or not it was Olympics didn't really matter to them, but just because they've grown up in an era where they're used to seeing, the X Games and all the kind of different types of action sport festivals. So they don't really have nearly as much of that countercultural kind of selling out ethos. And I almost think a lot of them don't even see these sports as countercultural. Like, it's fine to be a soccer player and a surfer and a skateboarder and a climber. They're not like different realms like they are for the older participants. But what I think was probably the most interesting message, which isn't very profound, but really they just didn't care. Like, when we did this whole sort of focus groups with skateboarders between the age of probably 18 and 30, if it wasn't going to impact their local skate park and their crew, they really didn't care. They would tune in and watch the Olympics. If it was on their phone at the time, it was convenient, but their life was not going to change. And I think that is probably the dominant voice. We hear a lot in the subcultural media, there was so much media stuff. This is terrible. It's a sellout. We're selling our soul to this corporate, awful, body. And then you've got the international federations working really hard to get the message out there that it's a good thing. And they did a good job of that. But the majority are probably in the middle. It happened, and time, I guess, will tell, maybe to see whether it's really led to any shifts in how people feel about it. I just think they're not that interested in Olympics, is the real bottom line.
Thank you for this answer. We will have a last question, and after we will let Arima Takayuki, Professor Arima Takayuki, and Soichiro Minami to have the presentation. So the last question is from Gustavo Lopez dos Santos. So I will read it. Do you have any insight if the choice of new sports were carried together with an analysis of the Tokyo's existing venues for them, or if they were chosen first on the venues dealt with after? In other words, the existing venues in Tokyo or the possibility for using temporary venues weighted in the choice of the sports? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, look, the decision to have those sports was a 2-year process that Tokyo was involved with, and the staff at the IOC were involved with, and they worked really hard. We talked to them a lot through the time to really work with these sports to work out how it could happen. So they decided they wanted skateboarding, let's say, first, and then they decided where it was going to be, and they worked with World Skate to try to use existing facilities to make it movable. They didn't want to have any fixed facilities that would be something that wasn't used afterwards. So the idea of these facilities having multi-purposes and being reused was really important in the decision making, as well as, right through the decision making process.
Thank you, Belinda, for this answer, and thank you for your presentation. It was very good, and have a good evening. I see the dark is now in in your back, so thank you, and have a good evening in New Zealand, and we can continue the discussion after. And now we will let the floor to give the floor to Dr. Minami Soichiro and Professor Arima Takayuki. They will have a presentation now about the games and tourism in Japan. So do you have the possibility to share your slide, perhaps? Yes, you can put in diaporama and it will be perfect. This is perfect. Okay. I let you the floor, and you have 20-25 minutes for your presentation, and after we will have a few questions before the presentation of Professor Masamichi Aihara. I let you the floor. Thank you to be here today.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good morning. Actually, good evening in Japan. I'm Takayuki Arima. I'm specialized in tourism geography and working as an associate professor in Yokohama City University. And firstly, thank you for inviting us to speak our theme about the Olympics and the tourism in Tokyo 2020. And this presentation is presented by I and Dr. Minami. Dr. Minami is working in an institute related with the Ministry of Japan, Ministry of Land and Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism. Okay, let's get started. In our presentation, we are talking in 3 subjects. The first I introduced the situation of the tourism in the period of holding Tokyo 2020. Secondly, Dr. Minami is talking about the result of our analysis of tourist behaviors of international tourists. This research is also have done with the Marie Delpress. She's here also. Yeah, she's also the assist our research. And the last, I'm talking about the topics of the researches of Olympics and tourism in Japan in this 8 years. Okay, so let me speak first. You know that we did not have the general tourists in Tokyo in the Olympics because of spreading COVID-19. As you can, this graph, this shows the numbers of the infections of the COVID-19 in Tokyo. In the time of Tokyo 2020, it's just timing of increasing the numbers radically. And the government called the state of emergency from July to September. So basically, the border is closed to Japan, except us athletes and staffs of Tokyo 2020. So this Olympics and the Paralympics is very, very rare situation for the tourism. And the athletes and officials were also banned going out from athletes' village and stadiums. The playbook says you must not use the public transport. You must not walk around the city and visit tourist areas, shops, restaurants, or bars and gyms, etc. So this playbook is treated strictly so that some athletes deprived a right of joining the games because they took a sightseeing trip in Tokyo. I feel a little bit sorry to these athletes about that. These are one of the pictures around the stadiums in holding the Tokyo 2020. Yeah, that's the rare pictures. The left pictures that shows a closing gate to stadium and barricade are there. And so people cannot see the real game, but just sounds are there. Just sounds are there. So few people were stopped and trying to peek it, to see it. As shown in the middle pictures like that. Okay. And some people, I think there were tourists, but mainly Japanese tourists, were coming to see the torch in the right side pictures. Anyway, not many people, I mean, a few people were going out for watching something about the Tokyo 2020. A few people are there. And this is the situation of the tourist spots. The situation are the same. There were a few people because of the government's state of emergency in that time. As a national character, Japanese people are honest and tending to follow the rules. So many people did not try to go out in this period of increasing the infection of COVID-19. And just one picture at the bottom of middle is the refurbished train station near the Olympic main stadium. And actually some facilities are changed for this Olympic Games. So, so this is the end of the introducing the situation of tourism in Tokyo 2020. Tokyo 2020 did not influence to tourism in Tokyo in aspect of tourist behaviors by COVID-19. But some investment and facilities refurbished before Tokyo 2020 have been done already. So that this influence might be appeared in the future of tourism in Tokyo and in Japan. And from now, Dr. Minami is introducing our survey and analysis about international tourists. So please, they speak, Minami Sensei.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Soichiro Minami. My specialty is economics for transportation and environment. So I introduce our research and analysis by questionnaire survey for international guests come to Tokyo. Purpose of this chapter for estimating the behavior of international tourists during mega event like Tokyo 2020. Understanding effect to behavior by their attitude to avoidance or non-avoidance to the host city during the game. Question survey in 2019 December, and about 300 response. So at first, this is overview of result of the survey, and main nationality is European and Oceania. This is unique of this survey. In fact, that main international tourists in Japan and also in Tokyo are dominated in Asian tourists. by official statistics, there are nearly 70 to 80%. So this is different to normal situation. Next. And this is this graph, and accompany person is mainly family and friends. We think it is because survey conducted in Christmas season, and many respondents are first-time tourists in Tokyo and staying from 1 to 10 days. Its average is about a week. Next, please. And this is the and this survey has a question, which is: did you come to Tokyo if Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games held in 2019? This means if the Olympic game hold, some people choose not to come to the host city, which is called crowding out effect. In this survey, for calculating this effect of this crowding out, we divided into the two groups by their attitude to come or not to come during the Olympic game in just hypothetical situation. If they choose yes, I come to Tokyo, we named respondent with non-avoidance. If they choose no, I don't come to Tokyo, we named avoidance. So this is not this is true in this survey 15% and 50%. So this means if we hold mega event like an Olympic game, just half of ordinary tourists may be reducing. This is very interesting result, we think. Next. And this is result of comparing their demographic by non-avoidance or avoidance. This table shows result of chi-square test. From this table, all variables in this table show not significance statistically. However, nationality and times of visit Tokyo are very slightly having a mean avoidance attitude. In fact, respondents from Oceania who are almost of Australia have a tendency to have avoidance, so they want not to come compared to other countries. Also, respondents have many experience to come to Tokyo, who means repeater, have a tendency to have non-avoidance, so the repeater want to come to sharing Olympic compared first visitors. Next, please. Next. This map shows the different overnight staying place between avoidance and non-avoidance attitude. From this map, avoidance people who don't want to come to Tokyo during Olympic Games have a tendency to stay in one specific place, which are Shinjuku area compared to non-avoidant people. Non-avoidant people who can come to Tokyo during Olympic Games tend to stay more broad place, especially downtown area such as Ueno and Asakusa. In this map, Shinjuku area is western to Tokyo, and the largest passenger in railway all over the world, and Ueno area and Asakusa area in eastern area in Tokyo. And we think this difference can be derived from their experience of Tokyo, which means repeater or not indirectly. repeater may have knowledge about Tokyo so that they can choose to stay on their town. Next, please. This is the result of cluster analysis of visiting place, cluster analysis of visiting place from questionnaire data. For the result, place which means spot are divided into 4 features. Firstly, we named national tourist spot. This is the very famous tourist spot in Japan and Tokyo. Secondly, we named Tokyo art and culture spot, including museum and kabuki theater and so on. The third, Tokyo major and niche tourist spot, including Shibuya, Harajuku, Asakusa, and niche spot, example, Kappabashi shopping street. And last one is Tokyo suburban area. This place located out of Tokyo city, such as Hakone Mountain and Yokohama city and Kamakura city. Next, please. This is picture of typically place from left. Imperial Palace. B picture Kabuki Theater in Tokyo. Third is Shibuya, the Scramble Crossing. Fourth, D picture Hakone Mountain. Next, please. Also, the visiting places are different by avoidance attitude. This table represents the result of cross tabulation between avoidance attitude and their visiting place, which divided into 4 categories before its chi-square test. Statically, the item of D, Tokyo suburban area, especially show significant difference between avoidance and non-avoidance people. From this result, people have non-avoidance attitude who can come to Tokyo during Olympic Games tend to go outside Tokyo City. And this is not a significant level, but non-avoidance people scientifically have a tendency to go to B, Tokyo art, culture, and sport like museum and garden too. This is a remarkable result of this study, so that we need policy and measure to promote suburb and art and culture attitude in the city to international visitors during Olympic Games, especially not to first-time tourists, I mean repeater. Next, please. This is summary of second part. Tokyo tourist spot Tokyo divided 4 categories. Non-avoidance international tourists prefer to go to Tokyo suburban area compared avoidance international tourists. Avoidance international tourists stayed specific areas such as Shinjuku, which non-avoidance international tourism stay more broad area, including downtown area such as Ueno and Asakusa. From this analysis, non-avoidance tourists tend to repeater. So switch to Professor Arima.
Okay, yeah. So this is the survey, this is the result of survey, just a hypothetical story. So actually we don't have the tourists in the Tokyo 2020. So just the hypothetical story by the survey. So So the third one, third chapter, I introduced the trend of Japanese researchers after decision of holding Tokyo 2020 Games. Actually, the reports or research about tourism and Olympics before World War or World War II. But in this presentation, I'm introducing the research related to Tokyo 2020, because the Tokyo 2020 also generated a lot of research, books, articles, and reports about relations between Olympics and tourism in Japan. So, so please think the Japanese researchers' viewpoint to them in Tokyo 2020. Okay, in the Japanese research from 2013 to 2021, there are 8 topics of the research developed, the tourism policy or something. Yeah. So I explain these 8 topics from now. The first one is about tourism policy and its concept. The concept of tourism policy in Tokyo 2020 are also in Tokyo and Japan. The related, the concept of tourism policy in Tokyo and Japan is very similar to London Olympic Games. So many researchers and administrations refer the policy of London and Great Britain. But there were no argument that tourism policy of London is good example to Tokyo or not. There are no argument. I think that the similarity of the tourism situation should have argued before referring the policy and its effect. So yeah, maybe the London and Great Britain is a good sample for us, but we need more argument before creating policy. We had to do that. Okay, and also the concrete tourism planning of Tokyo were appointed by the government and the administration. In this argument, the preparation for international tourists and ICT environment are main theme to be pointed. Also, the government and local administration pointed the importance of developing sport tourism. This is one of the main features of the relation between tourism and Olympics. So the sport tourism is the one of the key word of the relation of between Olympics and tourism in Tokyo 2020. And the third one, this is a discussion about physical dimension, such as facilities, infrastructures, and amenities. Especially the viewpoint is from science, technology, or maintenance of urban facilities, or an universal facilities. And the fourth one, the bottom one, fourth one is a business or marketing research of tourism and Olympics. And also some legal system are argued, such as the hotel management law. This is related with Airbnb or something, yeah. And this non-visible dimension, that is the non-visible dimension. The many sociologists pointed critically many aspects of the games. Other 4 topics are very easy to understand. The public awareness, that means Japanese people awareness is also conducted in the research in these 8 years. However, these ones are done before COVID-19. In the research, Japanese people expected economic benefits by holding the Olympics, but on the other hand, worried about the language barriers. And the attention to new types of tourism is one of the main themes of the research developed in Tokyo 2020. The researchers pointed that Olympics started to develop or generate a new type of tourism in Tokyo and Japan, especially Japanese food tourism and sports tourism. And they also pointed to generate new tourist spots in Tokyo and Japan by this event, but we don't know this is correct or not, because this is the argument for the future. and some of the researchers calculated the economic effect. It was expected $30 billion US dollars to only tourism sector, which was expected, but yeah, that was also calculated before expanding COVID-19. And the last one, the tourism education was the one on the discussions by Japanese researchers now, especially the education of omotenashi, which is the Japanese mindset for the service, is the mainly argued. And the researchers pointed that more research is needed about omotenashi in the time of the Tokyo 2020 or for the future. So anyway, these 8 topics are developed by Tokyo 2020 for researchers in researchers' world in Japan. So the 8 topics are the mainstream for us of Japanese researchers. So finally, the page is they represent the summary of this presentation. So the first three, Tokyo 2020, did not influence tourism in Tokyo in aspect of tourist behaviors because by the COVID-19 and the state of emergency by the government. But from our research, our survey in 2019, avoidance international tourists stayed at specific areas such as Shinjuku, while non-avoidance international tourists. So these tourists are also regarded as the tourists in Olympic Games. They have stayed more broad area, including downtown areas such as Ueno, Asakusa, because they are mainly repeaters. So they knows the information about the place, of Tokyo. And the Japanese researchers of the Olympics and tourism, Japanese researchers of the Olympics and tourism have been developed in 8 topics in these 8 years. So this is a summary of our presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and please ask some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Takayuki, Arima, and Dr. Soichiro Minami for this presentation. If there is any question in the room, we can take the mic, and we don't have many time before the next presentation and the round table. So I see no question. Perhaps I have for this point, I have one. Marie de la Place, do you have a question? I let you the mic, Marie de la Place.
Okay, thanks, Alexandre, and thanks, Soichiro and Takayuki, for your presentation. I have just a question concerning the new type of tourism. Is there some research concerning new type of tourism, such as out of the beaten tracks tourism?
Out of beaten tracks.
It's a new kind of tourism where tourists are visiting some places which are not known.
Oh.
We call out of the beaten tracks tourism.
Yes, the hidden place. So the place that are not famous in international.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah. The many researchers pointed that the foreigners find a new place, the new place to sightseeing or new place to play or something. So I think that means the new sports and new areas that find it by the tourist after Tokyo 2020, and also the administration or the government try to create new spots or create new hidden places and finding the new hidden places by the government or by the tourists, by the administration. We were trying to develop their places, the many places. So I think that the researchers pointed that the new places are created. But actually we didn't have the tourists in Tokyo 2020. So we don't know from after this Olympic Games, because still we are restricted to go there somewhere to freely. So yeah, we need to survey after Tokyo 2020. Yeah, we need to survey the situation of Tokyo 2020. So, but maybe some places are created, and the presentation before our presentation, that she pointed at the new places like urban sports park or something. So maybe we created the new sports park, or one or two, or just a few parks. So that places, maybe some people are coming to play the sports or something. I don't know, but the play the skateboarding or something. Yeah.
Thank you for this answer. I will be in obligation to move to the second presentation. Thank you to present the question of the games and the tourism for Tokyo. It was evidently a hard question because of the situation of the COVID, and we hope, everybody hopes that the situation will be better in 2022, and I hope we will have the possibility to go to Japan and to see perhaps from hidden place. So thank you, Professor Takayuki, Arima, and thank you, Dr. Soichiro Minami. We will now switch between Tokyo to Osaka, and perhaps Professor Masamichi Aihara was is now able to make the presentation. Thank you to have the PowerPoint. Thank you, Professor Masamichi Aihara, to be here today, and we will talk on the case of Osaka World Expo and Osaka 2008 Olympic bid. I let you now the speak, Professor Masamichi Aihara, and thank you for your presentation and to be here today.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, everyone. My presentation up is too early, so my both are ravi de faire votre connaissance. Je m'appelle Masamichi Aihara. Je suis professeur dans Osaka University de Economic. Enchanté. From now on, I'm speaking by English. My presentation title: Osaka 28 Olympic bid and Osaka-Kansai Japan Expo 2025. Okay. First of all, let me explain about the Osaka bid 28 over time. Did you know that the Japan World Expo was held in Osaka in 1970? It is said that the first voice of Olympic Games in Osaka was raised after the end of the 1970 Japan World Expo. However, in Osaka at that time, it was judged to be premature due to the state of urban infrastructure development, and no specific consideration was given. In 1990, 20 years after the Japan World Expo, Osaka held an international expo called the International Flower and Greenery Expo. In addition, Kansai International Airport opened in 1994, and Osaka has been established as an international city. As for sports facilities, many facilities were being developing at international standards in preparation was 1997. 52nd Namihaya National Sports Festival called Namihaya National Sports Festival. Against this background, the momentum was Olympic Games in Osaka was cultivated again. Masaya Nishio, who was the mayor of Osaka at this time, announced in January 1992 that he would work on a full-scale investigation and motivation was bid towards Olympic Games at the City Council. Following discussions by the City Council of Osaka on June 1, 1992, the Osaka City Olympic Games Research Group, which consists of 7 related values of Osaka City, should be the 28 games that will raise foundation for hosting the Olympic Game. The report was compiled in 1994 that it could be held in response to the report on March 30, 1994. The plenary session of Osaka City Council anonymously made a resolution on the bid and holding of the Osaka Games and announced that it was aimed to hold the Olympic Games in the early 21st century, that it would aim to, furthermore, on March 15, 1995, the Osaka City Council resolved to declare the bid towards 29th Olympic Games in Osaka, with the tournament aiming for the bid in 28. Since then, the government and students have been united in the bid activities in earnest. Subsequently, in Osaka City, the Osaka Olympic Games Bid Promotion Council was established on October 20, 1995, and Masafumi Onishi, chairman of the Osaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry, was elected as the chairman, and 364 people, including representatives of each organization, became a member. In May 1996, the Osaka Prefecture Assembly voted on the bid of the 29 Olympic Games in Osaka, expanding the circle of bid activity and increasing the number of members from 364 to 500. Only one city can run for the IOC as a candidate city for the Olympic Game, and each NOC, National Olympic Committee, called NOC, can run for one city, will be fulfilled. On December 19, 1995, the city of Osaka submitted a statement of intention to hold the 29th Olympic Games in Osaka, and on September 5, 1996, submitted an application for candidacy for holding the 29th Olympic Games to JOC, called the Japan Olympic Committee. However, because Yokohama City also ran as a candidate, it became a battle between the two cities. On April 30, 1997, both Osaka City and Yokohama City submitted the outline plan for the 29 Olympic Games to JOC, and JOC submitted Osaka City on June 10th and 11th. To December 30th, on the day of the event, we conducted a field survey of Yokohama City. Then on August 13, 1997, 2007, after presentation by both cities, a vote was held by the selection committee. Osaka City has 29 votes, and Yokohama City has 17 votes. Osaka City has been selected as a domestic candidate city. The table above shows the activity to bid for 2060 Rio de Janeiro Olympic, where Tokyo has been a candidate city. The table below shows the activity to bid for 28 Osaka Olympics. It is held at about the same time. Expect that there is no IOC poll and the first candidate city presentation in blue letters. You can see that the Olympic bid activity has not changed much. The competition venue plan will be a new Olympic stadium and India pool as the main venue, Osaka. Osaka's plan was to utilize many existing facilities, centering on the facility constructed at the 1997 National Sports Festival. In order to reduce the burden of construction costs and post-use, we decided to use temporary equipment. On July 13, 2021, the venue for the 29 Olympic Games was decided at the IOC Moscow General Assembly. Candidate cities are Beijing, Toronto, Istanbul, Paris, and Osaka. Osaka won 6 votes in the first vote and finished at the bottom. We lost with only 6 votes. The number of votes when the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Games were invited, it was turbulence that Chicago lost in the first vote. In second vote, Tokyo was at the bottom and lost. Next, this is the number of votes obtained when the bid for Tokyo was successful in the bid for 2020 Olympics. The first time we got 42 votes, and the second time we got 60 votes. In the first round, Istanbul and Madrid had the same number of votes with 26 votes. Therefore, I voted again to decide the second place. It was a very rare case that Tokyo is won. Moscow, which lost the least number of votes in the first vote, has 15 votes. So you can see how few 6 voted are in Osaka. The point that Osaka was evaluated by the IOC is that it has high quality sports facilities. It had a high standard of Olympic village accommodations. On the contrary, 3 points were pointed out as issues: legal matters, immigration, environmental protection, and the transportation. This presentation will not be explained in detail due to time constraints. If you are interested, please ask later. At this 2025 Expo, the competition was held in 3 cities: Osaka, Ekaterinburg, and Baku. As a result, Osaka succeeded inviting the number of votes has been properly obtained for the first and second time. Before we talk about the Expo, let me talk about the history of Osaka. The population of Tokyo is about 14 million. On the other hand, the population of Osaka is about 8 million. It can be said that it is common sense among Japanese people that Tokyo is the city with the largest population in Japan. But did you know that this common sense is very recent? Notice the 1955 red circle in the figure below. In fact, in 1925, Osaka was the most populous city in Japan. In 1925, Osaka was called Great Osaka. In sense of Big Osaka, around 1935, it was called Tokyo for politics and the Osaka economy in Japan's over-concentration in Tokyo is not corrected, but it can be said that politics and the economy were dispersed in the 1925. Why did Osaka, which was proud of its prosperity in 1925, decline? I would like to explain from the three perspectives: disaster, the collapse of the bubble economy, and the failure to bid for the Olympics. I will explain about Osaka, which was at the mercy of the G3 things. The Great Hanshin Awards earthquake struck in 1985, killing 6,434 people and damaged 9 trillion, 10 trillion yen, which had a tremendous impact on the Kansai economy. But after that, many companies left the area. When restructuring demand had run its course, and the economy was in a slump in the medium term. In addition, restructuring costs were a medium term burden on the finance of the relevant local governments. As a result, positive investment tended to be delayed in areas such as Kobe until the first half of 1990. Kobe Port was in the top 5 in terms of container holdings volume in the world. From the later half of the 1990s to 20th centuries, it was in 20th place. In 2016, it was sluggish at 55th place, partly due to the growth of neighboring Asian country, the failure of the Kobe port to make positive investment due to the earthquake also contributed to the decline in its international status. The second point is a busting of the real estate bubble. Looking at the change in the land prices announced by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism, Osaka rose significantly above Tokyo and Aichi at the peak around 1990. On the contrary, the recovery situation continued to be lower than Tokyo and Aichi. The real estate bubble caused the long-term stagnations of the Japanese economy. But it can be said that the area in Kansai was very widespread and the damage caused by the bursting of the bubble was very serious. The real estate market in Kansai is smaller than that in Tokyo. Under these circumstances, real estate prices tend to jump when assets similar to those in Tokyo come in. Osaka may have been danced too much by the bubble. Next is industrial structure. Osaka does not have the automobile industry, which is a representative industry of Japan. It was financially difficult. Looking at the manufacturing industry over the last 3 decades, global competition has intensified. In the midst of global competition, the composition of the automobile industry, which has maintenance its strong performance, and the electrical machinery industry, which have fallen into a difficult business environment, has become clear compared to region, where major automobile companies such as Toyota are located, with the Kansai region, where the home application industry such as Panasonic and Sharp is located. We can see the strong performance of the tube economy and the slump in the Kansai's economy. Looking at the value of manufacturing and the shipment in the 2018 industry survey, transportation machinery accounted for 43.2% in the tube region, while it was 9% in the Kansai region. In Japan, it is 21.4%, which is much lower than the average looking at the trade statistics in 2019. Automobiles and automobile parts accounted for 43.3% in the tube region, while transportation equipment in the Kansai region accounted for only 4.4%. Transportation equipment in Japan is 23.6%. So it can be said that it is ever lower. In the electrical machinery industry, the catch-up of China and South Korea was fierce due to the progress of modularization. It was a headwind environmental for Japanese companies that are good at matching. Commoditization was also remarkable, and it was involved in fierce price competition. Many electronics manufacturers have been for grinding technology. This is an area where Japan has maintained its international competitive for the past 30 years. The difference is one of the causes of the Kansai economic downstream. Amid globalization, corporate management required speed and innovation. However, many Japanese companies have not been able to respond with flexibility due to their past successful experience. In particular, the manufacturing industry Kansai has such an impact. The third is the delay in Bay Area development due to the failure to bid for the Osaka Olympic. In 1988, the city of Osaka formulated the Transport Osaka Basic Plan to develop Umeshima, Maishima, and Sakishima as a new city centers public fund 700 billion yen was invested, but the plan was crushed by the bursting of the bubble economy. As the vast landfill area spread this, he moved to bid towards the 28 Olympic Games as a breakthrough, but lost to Beijing. Umeshima, Maishima, and Sakushima are close to central Osaka, about 10 kilometers away, and can be accessed in about 30 minutes by train or car. However, despite the good access, after the failure to bid for the Olympics, there were few companies entering the market, and vacant lots remained conspicuous for a long time. Of course, the administration did not do anything. Utilizing the tax system, he made an effort to attract factories and improve the pay. However, as developed country became service and waste became cheaper and emerging countries became industrialized. The attraction of factories did not proceed. The point of sticking to the factory site for redevelopment is a reflection material. As a result, Umeshima, Maishima, and Sakushima have been called negative heritage in Osaka for 30 years. If the economy has deteriorated due to the failure to bid for the Olympics, the success of the Expo will be important for the revival of Osaka and Kansai economies. The success of the Expo, which is a big event, is important not only for the Kansai economy, but also for the leap of the Japanese economy. If the Expo was successful in Maishima, a candidate site for the Olympic Games, and it were to be IR, an integrated resort, the negative legacy of many years would turn positive, leading to the creation of the positive atmosphere in Kansai economy. Holding period April 13th, October to October 30th, 140 days. Place, venue, Osaka, Umeshima. Established number of visitors is approximately 28.2 million. Economics spillover estimate value is approximately 2 trillion yen. Creating a legacy is also important point of when it comes to responding to the Expo. In particular, responding to the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which is the theme of the Expo, is directly linked to the SDGs as the international goals for active achievement of sustainable world by 2030s, set forth in 2030s agenda for sustainable development adopted at the United Nations Summit in September 2015, with 70 goals and 169 targets, 232 indicators. It shows what future development should be. The Expo is a place to gather wisdom from all over the world in order to tackle various issues on global scales. And in recent years, there has been increasing interest in solving social issues. Currently, in many Japanese companies, the interest in SDGs is very high. but the CSR department is in charge of SDGs, and the profit department is rarely involved. On the other hand, overseas companies are beginning to see SDGs as a promising business opportunity. SDGs is a list of goals for achievement social issues around the world. So if we can provide effective solution to these, it will directly lead to global business. In addition, there are many venture companies and small and medium-sized enterprises that are highly interested in social issues these days. And there is another important point of view regarding the Expo, which can open up new business frontiers, but is absolutely necessary for companies and people all over the country to make it a place for business opportunity and self-expression. There is a little time left to hold Kansai in the next 3 years, including Tokyo. Isn't it important to gather the power of the whole country? In some cases, it may be possible to considering set up satellite venue in areas such as Kansai. At the Expo, not only will you see the exhibit, but 8 billion people around the world will exchange ideas and compete in the future society. In addition, we will launch an online platform that allows you to share issues and solutions from around the world before the Expo. An online platform that can be shared and the solution has been set up. Mechanism has been created to excite people all over the world, even before the event. It is also aiming to be a case of gathering the wisdom of the world, such as cutting-edge technology, are created and transmitting new ideas. It should be an opportunity for Japan as a whole, not just one even in Osaka. Osaka, I would like to talk about the example of collaboration between Osaka City, 3 professional sport team, and the university. There is an island called Maishima next to Yumeshima, the venue for the Expo. This was the main venue for the Osaka Olympic. 3 professional soccer football Cerezo, professional Soccer League J1, Osaka of professional baseball, Oryx Blue Waves, and Ebesa Osaka of basketball and best. It is a rare area in the world. There are also baseball field, tennis court, futsal field, and sports facilities for people with disabilities. There are many leisure facilities. You can ride buggies or make a dog park. There are accommodation. Okay, just skip here. There are many leisure space. Okay. The disadvantage of Maishima is that it is not well known to students. It is inconvenient due to poor transportation access. There is only one tunnel and one bridge. If you go by public transport, you have to take a bike. To solve this problem, there is an organization called the Student Maishima Project. There is a Maishima project in Osaka. This is a project in which the city of Osaka and 3 professional sport teams have invested to jointly revitable Maishima. A student volunteer and planning the event. Here are some example. That's what is a mystery solved. it is a difficult knowledge or things that solve people can be solved, a problem that any can understand if they hear the answer. In Japan, it is game that is popular among young people. So first of all, I will convey the charm of Mashima. Next, increase the number of visitors to Mashima. By doing so, they planned it came because it was I lead to the activation of Mashima. Okay, the title is Tour of My Mystery Solving Island. I decided to call it the challenge from 3 professional teams. The professional problem of solving the mystery in the sports-related problem. The prizes are good from 3 teams and the ticket for facilities, Mashima. Students thought that professional sports fans and would become a Mashima fan. So by the, okay, just skip this here. It is a automatic response screen by Lai. Lai was also created by student. Oh, sorry, just the Japanese. Okay. Just this is my presentation is finished now. So please ask something question. Thank you for attention. Please, if you any question, could you send me by chat, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Masamichi Aihara, for your presentation. It was very exciting. So I let people who have a question to send it by chat or perhaps to send you by email after the presentation. Thank you, because we are running out of time. If there is any question, so I propose Professor Masamichi Aihara, if there is any questions that come, we will send you by email. And you can answer after this conference by email. And thank you for what you say. It was exciting to see the case of Osaka. It was very interesting to have Osaka and Tokyo comparison this morning. And we will have a 5 minutes of break now. And in 5 minutes, we will have the roundtable with people from Tokyo 2020 and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government about the question of the games and the lessons of Tokyo 2020. Thank you, Professor Masamichi Aihara, and have a good day in Japan, and see you for all the people present here in 5 minutes for the roundtable with the stakeholder of Tokyo Games. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir.